I found out my credit was destroyed on a Tuesday afternoon in a bank parking lot. I just sat there in my truck for a while, staring at the loan officer's business card. I didn't call Karen right away. I just sat there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Andre. I'm 41 years old, and I've worked as a diesel mechanic for MARTA, Atlanta's transit authority, for going on 14 years. I maintain city buses, I crawl under them, I diagnose them, I keep them running so people can get to work. It's not glamorous, but it's honest, and it pays steady. Benefits, pension, the whole thing. I was proud of that. Karen and I have been married 11 years. We met at a cookout in Decatur through mutual friends. She was funny, sharp, had this energy about her that pulled you in. We built something together, a house in Stonecrest, 2 kids, a life that felt real and solid. I thought we were on the same page about most things. Our routine was simple. I left the house by 5:15 most mornings. Long shifts, physical work. Karen worked part-time doing administrative work for a dental office, maybe 20 hours a week. We'd agreed on that arrangement years ago when our youngest was born. It made sense at the time. What I didn't fully register, not then anyway, was how much her world had quietly shifted. Somewhere around 2021, Karen got serious about Instagram. That's the only word for it, serious. She'd always posted here and there, like most people. But this was different. She started talking about content and aesthetic and lighting in the house. She rearranged the living room furniture 3 times in 1 year. New throw pillows, new curtains, a gallery wall she spent an entire weekend putting together. I didn't say much about it. People have hobbies, but the packages started coming more regularly after that. Amazon, mostly. Sometimes UPS. Sometimes things I didn't recognize, names of stores I'd never heard of. I'd see them stacked near the garage door when I got home, and Karen would usually have already moved them inside by the time I came in to wash up for dinner. I asked about it a few times, casually. Just some things for the house, she'd say, or I got a good deal. Or she'd mention something the kids needed, and I'd let it go because I was tired and dinner was on the table, and it didn't seem worth the energy. The thing about working the kind of job I work is that you get very good at noticing when something isn't running right. It's subtle at first, a sound that's slightly off, a vibration that wasn't there last week. Most people wouldn't catch it. But if you've been doing it long enough, you feel it before you can explain it. I started feeling something like that at home around the spring of last year. Nothing I could point to directly. Karen seemed fine, the kids were good, but the grocery trips were getting more expensive. The electric bill jumped. I had to move money from savings to checking twice in 1 month, which I hadn't done in years. And when I mentioned it, Karen said it was just inflation. She said everyone was dealing with it. And I believed her, because honestly, that wasn't an unreasonable thing to say. Prices were up, everybody was feeling it. So I adjusted, cut back on a few things myself, packed lunch more often, put off getting new work boots longer than I should have. Before I go further, if you're watching this and any of this sounds familiar, even a little bit, drop something in the comments. I know I'm not the only one who's been here. And if you're new, subscribe. I share these stories because I think real people deserve to hear real things. Where are you watching from? I'm always curious. Now, the reason I was at that bank in the first place was a 2019 F-150 I'd had my eye on. Nothing extravagant, used, good mileage, a mechanic I knew had maintained it himself. I needed a more reliable vehicle. Mine had close to 199,000 miles on it and was starting to cost me more than it was worth. It felt like a responsible, straightforward decision. I went in confident. I had a job, a pension, 14 years at the same employer. I'd bought our house. I thought this was going to be a 30-minute conversation. The loan officer came back to the desk with a look on his face that I still think about. He turned the screen toward me and walked me through it slowly, like he wasn't sure how much I already knew. 4 credit cards, balances I didn't recognize, accounts I had never opened, all in my name. The total was sitting just under $43,000. I asked him to print the report. I folded it twice and put it in my jacket pocket. I thanked him for his time. I walked out to my truck and I sat there in that parking lot and I did not move for a long time. Because the name on those accounts was mine. But the purchases, furniture stores, Clothing boutiques, home decor websites, a jewelry retailer in Buckhead, those weren't mine. And I already knew whose they were. I drove home that evening like I was on autopilot. I knew every turn between that bank and our house, and I made all of them without thinking. The credit report was still folded in my jacket pocket. I could feel it there. Karen's car was in the driveway. The lights were on inside. I could see the blue flicker of the TV through the front window. Everything looked exactly the way it always looked. And that's what got me. How completely normal it all appeared from the outside. I sat in the truck for a few minutes before going in. I wasn't ready to say anything yet. I needed to understand what I was actually looking at before I opened my mouth. Because I've learned over the years that there's a difference between reacting and responding. I didn't want to walk in there and say something I couldn't take back before I had the full picture. So I went inside, said hello, ate dinner, helped our youngest with homework, and acted like nothing had happened. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done. After the kids were in bed, I went out to the garage under the pretense of checking something on the truck. I pulled up my credit report on my phone, the full version, through one of the free services. I went through it line by line, slowly. 4 accounts, 3 credit cards and 1 store card. The oldest one had been opened in 2020. That one had a credit limit of $3,500 and the balance was nearly maxed. The most recent had been opened 14 months ago. The charges were consistent, not random or erratic, but steady. Monthly purchases, sometimes weekly. Furniture retailers, home goods, clothing, a few spa charges, a recurring subscription to some kind of styling service I'd never heard of. None of it was hidden in a way that looked panicked or impulsive. It was organized. Routine. That told me something. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a moment of bad judgment that spiraled. This was a system. I started paying closer attention over the next few days. Not in an aggressive way. I wasn't going through her phone or following her anywhere. I just started watching what had always been in front of me. The Instagram account, for one. Karen had around 4,200 followers, which isn't huge by any standard, but she treated it seriously. I scrolled back through her posts, something I honestly hadn't done in months, maybe longer. What I saw stopped me. Our living room looked like a magazine spread. New furniture I didn't remember buying. A console table I'd never seen before the photos. Candles, decorative trays, a lamp in the corner that I suddenly realized I walked past every day without ever asking where it came from. There was a post from last November showing a fall refresh of our bedroom. New bedding, new curtains, some kind of upholstered bench at the foot of the bed. The caption talked about creating a peaceful home environment. It had over 300 likes. I remembered that month. I remembered moving money between accounts and telling myself it was inflation. I want to be careful here about how I describe Karen, because she's not a cartoon villain. She's a real person, and she's the mother of my children. And for a long time, she was my partner in every sense of that word. I don't think she woke up one morning and decided to destroy our finances out of malice. What I think happened is slower and more complicated than that. I think she got pulled into something, that comparison cycle that social media runs on. And instead of pulling back when it got expensive, she found a way to keep going. And the way she found was my name and my credit. That doesn't make it acceptable. I want to be clear about that. But understanding it matters, because it changes how you deal with it. By the end of that first week, I'd done some rough math. Between the 4 accounts, minimum payments alone were somewhere around $900 a month. That money was coming from somewhere, and it wasn't from a line item I recognized in our budget, which meant either she was pulling it from places I didn't monitor closely, or some months she wasn't paying them at all, which would explain the 2 accounts that were showing late payment flags on the report. I checked our joint checking account history, going back 18 months. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Some of them labeled with store names, which I'd assumed were just regular purchases. A few larger ones with no label at all. I'd signed off on a financial life I didn't actually understand. That part was hard to sit with. Not because it let her off the hook, but because it meant I had been checked out in ways I hadn't admitted to myself. On Saturday morning, Karen was filming content in the living room. She had her phone on a little tripod, adjusting the angle, moving a vase 2 inches to the left, then 2 inches back. Our daughter walked through the frame, and Karen asked her, gently but firmly, to go to her room for a little while. I watched that from the kitchen doorway. I thought about the loan officer's face. I thought about $43,000. I thought about the work boots I'd put off buying. I didn't say anything. I poured my coffee and went to the backyard. That evening, I called my older brother Marcus. I didn't tell him everything. I just told him I'd found some financial stuff that didn't add up, and I needed to think through how to approach it. Marcus has always been level-headed. He didn't push me for details. He just said, make sure you know exactly what you're dealing with before you sit down with her. You don't want to go in half-informed. That was the right advice. So I spent the following week getting fully informed. I pulled every statement I could access. I documented the accounts, the balances, the opening dates, the purchase histories. I wrote it down on paper, in a notebook I kept in my truck. Not because I was building a legal case. I wasn't thinking that far ahead yet. But because I needed to see the whole shape of it laid out clearly. Sometimes things look different when they're written down. The shape of it, once I could see it fully, was this. Over approximately 4 years, nearly $43,000 in debt had been accumulated in my name, across accounts I had never authorized, to fund a version of our life that existed primarily on a social media page that most of our actual friends and family didn't even follow. We had a beautiful living room. We had matching furniture and coordinated throw blankets and a bedroom that looked like a boutique hotel in photographs. And I had been denied a loan for a used truck. I kept going through our normal routines that week. Dinners, bedtime, weekends. Karen seemed fine, relaxed even. She was planning some kind of summer home refresh based on a conversation I overheard her having on the phone with her sister. I didn't react to it. I just noted it. I decided I would talk to her on a Friday night. The kids would be at my mother-in-law's. They stayed there most Friday nights during the school year, which gave Karen and me the kind of quiet the week rarely offered. It was a natural window. No interruptions. No reason to keep things short. Just 2 adults in a house with nowhere to be. I didn't tell Karen what the conversation was going to be about. I didn't want her preparing a version of events before I'd had a chance to say what I needed to say. I just let the week move forward like normal. That week was strange to live through. I was functional, went to work, did my job, came home, helped with homework, watched some television. But there was a part of my mind that never fully left that notebook in my truck. I'd find myself in the middle of a completely ordinary moment and feel this low, steady pressure behind everything, like a sound you can't quite locate. I wasn't angry in the way people might expect. I want to be honest about that. It wasn't hot anger. It was something quieter and heavier. More like grief, maybe, or the feeling you get when you realize something has been broken for a long time and you're only now seeing it clearly. I kept thinking about the timeline. 4 years. The first account opened in the spring of 2020, right around the time the world shut down and everybody was home, and Instagram became something different than it had been before. I thought about that period, being home more, Karen being home, the kids doing school on laptops at the kitchen table. I remembered her getting more into the house during that time, redecorating, making things feel intentional. Her word. I had thought it was a healthy coping mechanism. A lot of people reorganized their homes that year. I didn't know she was financing it in my name. Wednesday evening, I did something I hadn't done in a while. I sat down and looked at our actual financial picture. Full picture, everything. Mortgage, car notes, utilities, her part-time income, my salary. I wanted to know concretely where we stood. It took me about an hour to put it all together. We were not okay. Between the hidden card balances, the late fees that had accumulated, and the way the minimum payments had been quietly bleeding our checking account, we were significantly further behind than I had understood us to be. The savings account I thought had a reasonable cushion in it, had about $1,900 in it. I had believed it was closer to $11,000. I closed the laptop and sat at the kitchen table for a long time. $43,000 doesn't just affect your credit score. It affects your options. It affects what you can do when something goes wrong. A medical bill, a roof issue, a transmission. It affects your ability to move, to make choices, to absorb the ordinary shocks of living. We had none of that buffer left. We were one real emergency away from serious trouble. And Karen was planning a summer home refresh. I'll say this about that week. I became aware of how much energy it takes to hold something like that inside a normal-looking life. Every dinner, every conversation about the kids' schedules, every "how was your day?" all of it had this other layer underneath it that I was the only one carrying. That's an exhausting way to exist, even for a short time. I thought about whether she knew that I knew. I didn't believe she did. She was relaxed, engaged, normal. There was no defensiveness, no unusual behavior, nothing that suggested she felt anything closing in, which meant she felt safe. I turned that over in my mind more than once. After 4 years of this, she felt safe. That told me something about how invisible she believed it all was. And maybe about how invisible she believed I was. Checked out enough, busy enough, trusting enough that she could keep building something in the dark, and I'd never turn on the light. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because it was a real thing I had to reckon with about myself too. Thursday night, Karen showed me something on her phone, a side table she wanted to get for the entryway. She'd found it at some boutique home store, said it was on sale. "What do you think?" she asked. I looked at the picture. It was $340. "It's nice," I said. "I think it would pull the whole entryway together." I handed her phone back. "Let's hold off for now," I said, trying to be careful with spending. She gave me a look, not hostile, just slightly dismissive. "It's not that much, Andre." I didn't push back. I just said, "I know, just let's wait." She set her phone down and moved on. But I noticed the look. I'd seen that look before, without understanding what it meant. Now I understood it a little better. Friday came. I picked up the kids from school, drove them to their grandmother's, stayed for about 20 minutes. On the way back home, I stopped and got gas and sat there at the pump for a moment, with the summer air coming through the window. I thought about Marcus telling me to make sure I knew exactly what I was dealing with. I knew. I had it all documented. I had the credit report, the account histories, the math. What I didn't have was any certainty about what Karen was going to say, or what I was going to do with whatever she said. I'd been in situations at work where a repair looked straightforward until you got underneath and found that the damage ran deeper than the surface showed. Sometimes the job changes completely once you're in it. I had a feeling this might be one of those situations. Karen was in the kitchen when I got home. Something was on the stove. The house smelled good. She seemed relaxed and in decent spirits. She asked if the kids got to her mom's okay. I said yes. I set my keys down on the counter. I didn't go to the living room, and I didn't turn on the television. I just stood there for a moment, and something in the way I stood there must have registered, because she turned and looked at me. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "But I need to talk to you about something. When you get a minute." She studied my face for a second, turned the stove down. "Okay," she said. "What's going on?" I pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and sat down. I had the folded credit report in my jacket pocket, the original one the loan officer had printed. I'd carried it every day that week without quite knowing why. I put it on the table between us. She looked at it without touching it. Then she looked at me. And in that moment, the expression that moved across her face told me everything I needed to know before either of us said a single word. She already knew what it was. She didn't pick it up right away. She stood on the other side of the table and looked at the folded paper like she was deciding something. Then she pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. She didn't unfold it. She just rested her hands on the table and looked at me. "How long have you known?" she asked. Not "what is that?" Not "what's going on?" "How long have you known?" I told her. 2.5 weeks. Since the bank. She nodded slowly, like she was absorbing the timeline. Then she was quiet for a moment, and I let the quiet sit there because I wasn't going to fill it for her. What followed was one of the most difficult conversations of my life, and also one of the most honest ones we'd had in years. That's a painful thing to admit. That it took something like this to get us to a place of actual honesty. But that's what it was. She didn't deny it. I'll give her that. She could have tried to construct some explanation, some version where it wasn't as clear as it looked. She didn't. She confirmed the accounts, confirmed she'd opened them, confirmed how long it had been going on. What she said when she finally started talking was that it had started small. One card, a low limit, just to cover some things she didn't want to ask me about because she thought I'd say no. A piece of furniture, some clothes. She told herself she'd pay it off before I ever noticed. She didn't pay it off. She opened another one. I asked her to help me understand the part I kept getting stuck on. Not just the spending, but the specific decision to use my name. My credit. Without asking me. She was quiet for a long time after that question. What she said was that she knew I would have said no. And she wasn't ready to say no to herself. I sat with that answer. I didn't respond to it right away because I wanted to make sure I understood what she was actually telling me. She wasn't saying she hadn't known it was wrong. She was saying she had known, and had done it anyway, because stopping felt harder than continuing. That's a different thing, and it mattered that I understood the difference. I asked her about the Instagram, about the posts, about the furniture and the bedroom, and the fall refresh while I was moving money between accounts and skipping new work boots. That part was harder for her to talk about. She started to explain it in terms of the platform, the algorithm, the way it rewards consistency and aesthetics. And I stopped her. I told her I didn't need an explanation of how Instagram works. I needed her to tell me what she was getting from it that she wasn't getting from our actual life. She started crying then. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way someone cries when they've been caught carrying something they're ashamed of. She said she'd felt invisible for a long time, that the online part of her life was the only place she felt like she was seen, that the house, the photos, the aesthetic, it had become the thing she had that felt like hers. I heard that. I genuinely heard it. And I also thought about $43,000, about $1,900 in savings, about a loan I got denied in a bank parking lot. I held both of those things at the same time because that's what the situation required. I want to be honest about my own role in this because I think it matters. I had been checked out, not maliciously, not intentionally, but in the way that happens slowly when you're tired and work is long and the bills seem to be getting paid and nothing is visibly on fire. I had stopped asking questions. I had stopped paying close enough attention. I had created enough distance in our marriage that she had found ways to live around me rather than with me. That doesn't justify what she did. I need to be clear about that. Opening credit accounts in someone's name without their knowledge is not a communication problem. It's a breach, a serious one, and the financial damage is real and lasting. My credit score had dropped significantly. Rebuilding that was going to take time and money we didn't have easily available. But I'm also not interested in telling a story where I'm entirely the victim and she's entirely the villain, because that's not the truth, and I didn't live all of this to come out the other side and be dishonest about it. We talked for a long time that night, past midnight. The kind of conversation where you lose track of time because you're finally actually in it together. We talked about what came next, practically. The debt wasn't going to disappear. We were going to have to make a plan. Consolidation, a budget, probably some hard sacrifices for a while. I told her that the social media accounts needed to stop, not as punishment, but because we could not afford the life she was performing online, and I wasn't willing to keep financing a fiction. She agreed. She didn't argue about it. I also told her that I needed time, that I wasn't in a position to say that night what our marriage looked like going forward, because I'd been sitting on this for 2.5 weeks and I was tired and I needed space to think without the pressure of having to decide everything at once. She said she understood. I think she did. That was about 4 months ago now. We're still in the same house, still married, though I won't pretend it's been simple or that things are back to what they were, because they're not. We've been seeing a counselor, which was Karen's suggestion and one I agreed to, because I think we both needed a place to work through this with some structure. The debt is being addressed, slowly, carefully. We closed the accounts. We built a real budget, the kind we should have had years ago, and we both look at it together now every month without exception. My credit is starting to recover, but that's a long road. Karen's Instagram is gone. She deleted it herself, which I didn't ask her to do in front of me or make a moment out of. She just told me one morning that she'd deleted it. I nodded and said, okay. I think that was its own kind of reckoning for her that I didn't need to be in the middle of. What I think about most looking back isn't the anger, though that was real. It's the silence. All those years of packages by the garage door and bills I didn't look at closely enough, and conversations we didn't have because we were both in our own ways avoiding something. Silence in a marriage isn't neutral. It doesn't just sit there harmlessly. It fills up with things, assumptions, habits, secrets, distance. And then one day you're in a bank parking lot holding a piece of paper that tells you a story about your own life that you didn't know you were living. I'm not the same person I was before that Tuesday afternoon. I don't think that's entirely a bad thing. I pay closer attention now. To the finances, yes, but also to the marriage itself. To whether we're actually talking or just coexisting. That's the part that I think was always the real issue underneath everything else. The debt is a number. It's serious, it's real, and it has consequences. But numbers can be worked on. The other stuff, the distance, the silence, the way two people can live in the same house and slowly stop seeing each other, that's what I'm more focused on now. Because that's what started all of this. I don't know exactly where we land. I think that's honest. Some days feel more like the early years than they have in a long time. Other days are harder. I imagine that's going to be true for a while. But I'm in it with my eyes open now. That's different. And for right now, that's enough. If any part of this story stayed with you, whether it's the financial piece, the marriage piece, or just the feeling of realizing something had been going on longer than you knew, I'd like to hear from you. Drop something in the comments. I read them. And if you're not subscribed yet, I'd appreciate it. These stories take time to tell honestly, and there are more of them. Real ones, from real life.